Hi, I'm Andi Smiley, your friendly podcast guide. I help you create and grow a podcast that is fun and fulfilling. Whether you're just starting or a few years in, I share tips, stories from my own journey, and insights from podcasters I admire. Today's episode is the last episode of season 2, which is just crazy. In this episode, I'm giving you a behind-the-scenes peek on how the Friendly Podcast Guide did in November and my thoughts on season 2 overall. Also, how cute are these little Santas that are behind me? If you're just listening to the podcast, my mom decorates really cute for Christmas and December. And so I've got all of these little like gnome Santas on the bookshelf behind me, and they're just adorable. So I had to make sure they were in the video shot. So before we dive into how the Friendly Podcast Guide did, I like to answer 2 questions that I ask every guest that I have on the Friendly Podcast Guide. And the first one is, what's the last podcast you listened to for you, not for research or anything like that? And mine is a podcast called The Illusionist, which is a podcast all about language. It's really interesting because language is weird, and especially the English language. And so the episode that I listened to was all about food and how food gets how different foods get their names and how those names change. And it was really fascinating. I really love that podcast. It's very, very well produced and just incredibly interesting. So if you want an interesting podcast where you learn something, The Illusionist is a good one. And that's spelled with an A. So it's spelled Allusionist. I'll just put it in the show notes. Then you don't have to remember how to spell it. The other thing that I ask every guest is, what's a simple life hack or a simple thing that is making your life better right now? And I know I've talked about this before, but I don't think I've talked about it in this context right here, like as a simple life hack. So I'm putting it right here for today. Scott, my partner, and I use kid sleep podcasts specifically to help our kids fall asleep and to not bug us. Our oldest is 7, and so he sometimes isn't tired when his sister, who they share a room with, is. And so if we turn on a kid podcast, he can stay in his bed and listen to the podcast while his sister falls asleep. And so but he stays in his room because he's entertained and he's listening to something, so that Scott and I can still get stuff done upstairs. And it is one of the best things that I've done, just so that I get some time to myself, even if our oldest isn't tired yet. It's just the best. So if you need some help with bedtime, I would seriously try some kid sleep podcasts. We use Story Button, which is a kid podcast player. If you're not ready to invest in that because you want to see if it will even work for your kids first, before I had a Story Button, I just used a Bluetooth speaker and an iPad that just played to the speaker. And it has made my nights so much better. So that is the simple life hack that is making my life better right now. Okay, now I get to tell you about how the Friendly Podcast Guide did in November. So first of all, download numbers. There were 4 episodes in November. The first one was how the Friendly Podcast Guide did in October. So this episode, but last month. And that episode got 32 downloads. The next episode is 10 things I would do if I was starting a podcast in 2025. That one got 34 downloads. The next one was an interview I did with Catherine, who's the host of Nothing Much Happens, my favorite sleep podcast, and one of the top sleep podcasts in the world. Such a fun interview. It was so good. That one got 54 downloads. And then the last episode from last week was answering 9 common podcasting questions, and that one got 46 downloads. So it was actually a really interesting month. I wasn't expecting these download numbers because the first 2 episodes of this month got probably some of the lowest downloads of this season, but the last 2 episodes of this month got way more downloads than I expected, which is fun. That's a fun thing. I have a couple of guesses for why I think the download numbers are this way. Truly, I was expecting all of the download numbers for November to be in the 30s, maybe low 40s, just because at the end of a season is usually when you get your lowest downloads, in my experience, just because people get busy and you just kind of forget about all of the different podcasts because there are so many good ones out there, and life gets busy, especially November is Thanksgiving and you're getting ready for the holidays and Halloween's thrown in there and all of that. So I was expecting lower download numbers. So that's why the first 2 weeks made sense to me. But the last two having higher download numbers was a pleasant surprise. I think that my interview with Catherine got higher downloads because her listeners for her podcast, the people that follow her on Instagram, things like that, they probably wanted to hear from Catherine because she's amazing and really fun to listen to. So that's why I think the download numbers are higher for the interview. But the week after, I'm honestly not exactly sure. I'm going to look at that a little bit more and see if I can figure out why, but honestly, we don't always know why download numbers are the way they are. So I might figure it out, or I might never know. And that is one of the charms of podcasting. Next, I always tell you how much money I've made this year as of this recording. And as of right now, I am still at that $529 for this year. If you haven't listened to any of these other, like How the Friendly Podcast Guide is doing episodes, here's a quick recap. Earlier this year, I burned out. I had to stop podcasting altogether. I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't do all of the things. And I just stopped everything so that I could take a break this summer. And it was the best thing I could have done for myself, for my podcast, for my business. And so that's why I haven't made any money, as I took several months off, and a lot of things shifted with my podcast and my business. And so as I've been making those shifts, I have taken a step back from like focusing on money, and I just want to get a really solid foundation so that when I do start making money again, it will be in a way that doesn't burn me out. So that number will start going up soon, and I'll talk about that more at the end of this episode. So I haven't been focusing specifically on making money right now because I'm more focusing on podcast coaching calls. So, and this number has gone up. So I have done 22 podcast coaching calls, and 5 of those calls has been in November. So I have only 8 left to reach my goal of 30 podcast coaching calls by the end of this year. And I am super proud of myself, and I really think that I can do it. So if you need some help with your podcast, I would love to help you. The first call with me is always free. So DM me on Instagram or leave a comment in Spotify. However, get a hold of me somehow and we'll set up a call so I can help you with your podcast, because truly that has been one of my favorite parts of season 2 is just doing so many more podcast coaching calls and just helping you with your podcast. Oh, it's just been so much fun. So one of the fastest ways to grow your podcast is to experiment. Try new things, figure out what works for your show, for your people, and for yourself. And so every month I talk about the experiments that I did in my podcast for the previous month and tell you if they worked or not. And this has been really fun, and I am hoping that I do this forever with my podcast. Okay, the first experiment I tried in November is offering a very specific type of coaching call, and I called it a podcast jumpstart session, and these went so well. It was so much fun to help all of these women, especially moms, to figure out what's holding them back from starting a podcast and hopefully getting rid of all of that so that they can start their podcast. Yeah, it was just delightful. I love helping people start podcasts, especially women, because we need more women's voices out in the world, and a podcast is a great way to do it. My next experiment that I tried was I left in way more mistakes in November's episodes than I've ever done before, and I even left in like me laughing at myself making those mistakes. And I don't know if anyone else actually noticed. Like, I didn't get any like mean comments or anything, which was nice. It did make editing a little bit easier, and I felt like less of a robot. So I'm going to keep doing that. More than anything, it just helps me and anyone who listens to my show have a friendly reminder that making mistakes is not a bad thing, and it doesn't make you a terrible person. And I need that reminder way more often than I think I realize. So doing this has really helped me as a recovering perfectionist to let go of perfection. Another experiment that I tried was putting a block of keywords at the bottom of my show notes to see if it helps more people find my episodes through SEO. And I honestly don't know if this helped or not, but I know that it didn't hurt. So I'm definitely going to keep doing it because why not? And it does help me, thinking of those keywords has also helped me write my show notes better anyway. And so I see no downside at the moment. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say keywords, in some podcast platforms, there is a spot at the bottom of your, like when you're uploading a new episode, there's a spot at the bottom where you can put keywords. And every podcast hosting platform is going to call it something a little different, but it's just another way to help people find your show. I use Spotify for podcasters and they don't have a little spot at the bottom to put it. So I still wanted to be able to have these keywords that people might be searching for to help them find me so that I can help them. And so I just put it in a block at the bottom of my show description, my show notes. And I learned that from Brittany Herzberg, who is the queen of SEO. If you want to deep dive into SEO, she is your girl. She's amazing. And I've learned a lot from her about especially SEO for podcasting. Now I get to get a little bit sentimental and talk about how I feel overall about season 2. And honestly, it's definitely been a roller coaster of sorts. I was hoping at the beginning of the season, like before I even dropped the podcast trailer, I was hoping to get 150 downloads per episode, which looking back now, I realize was too high of an expectation for myself as I was like pivoting, changing what my podcast is about and doing so many other things. Having such a high expectation of myself was not the best idea. So I pivoted halfway through this season and decided that goal is going to be put on the shelf and I will revisit it later, maybe in season 4 or 5. So that was definitely a hard part about season 2, not reaching that goal that I thought I could reach. But there were so many things that I really loved about season 2. One of them is I am so proud of myself for how much I experimented with my podcast and my business that goes along with my podcast. I noticed that as I've been in this like experimental mindset, I'm able to see metrics that could make me really sad, like download numbers or like followers on social media. Those could make me sad because maybe they're lower than other people's. But when I'm in this experimental mindset, I see those numbers, those download numbers, those follower numbers as just information and not as something that defines my value as a human, my value as a podcaster, or the value of my business. And I wasn't expecting that. I knew that experimenting was going to help me improve my show, and I knew that it was going to help me figure out how to best help my people, all of you. But I didn't realize that it was going to help me personally be in a better headspace to continue being a creator and a podcaster. So that is something I am so grateful for from season 2. Another thing that I am super proud of myself for is video. Starting video was so scary. And so if you are in that spot and you're like, I know that I should start video, but I don't know how. I hear you. I was there. I was so worried about video. I had no idea how it was going to go. And well, truly, let me take that back. I was pretty sure it was going to work out just fine. But taking that leap into doing video, it's scary because it's all unknown, right? You don't know even how to do it. You're stumbling through trying to figure out how to record yourself and how to not just read your script and how to do bullet points that work and all of those little things, right? So scary. But I now know, now that I'm at the end of season 2 and I've done a whole season worth of video podcasting, I have realized that it really is not as hard as I thought it was going to be. And more than anything, you just have to do it, which is not always fun to hear that advice. But when you just dive in, when you just start trying and start to figure it out, now that I have done 12, 13, I think 13 episodes, maybe 14 video podcast episodes, looking back, it really wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be to add it into my like podcast workflow. And I know that I've improved a lot from my podcast trailer to now. So I'm really proud of myself for doing it, and I'm really excited to see how much more I can grow in this video podcasting aspect of my show. Truly, there are so many other things I could say about season 2, but the one thing that stands out the most to me is I am just so grateful for all of the people I was able to meet, all of the people I was able to help, and all of the people that were just so kind to me as I made this pivot, made this change. It's just been so much fun to meet you, and yeah, it's just been absolutely delightful. Okay, as I'm wrapping up, the one last thing that I've had people ask me is, what are you doing in between seasons? So I'm going to be doing a lot of things, but here's like a highlight list of the things that I'm going to be doing between seasons. The first thing on my list is to rest and read a lot of books. I read a lot all the time, but I'm really excited to be able to read even more and kind of like slow down a little bit. It feels like the past 3 months have been a bit of a sprint, and I'm ready to slow down and still be working on stuff. I've got a lot of ideas and a lot of fun things that I've kind of set on the back burner almost during this season. And so now I kind of get to pull those back out and try them and see what's going to work and what's not and all of that fun stuff. So I'm excited for that. I'm also really excited to celebrate Christmas. For the past several years, I've been putting out episodes in December, and it's made it a little bit stressful and less fun for me. So I'm really excited to not be stressed and not be worried about putting out episodes and promoting those episodes. I can just kind of relax a little bit and enjoy Christmas. One thing you can look forward to is bonus episodes. I've got several interviews that I was able to do that I wasn't able to fit into season 2 that will be coming out during this off season. I guess that's what we'll call it. I'm not sure. I hopefully will come up with a better name, but I've got some bonus episodes that are really fun, and you'll see them pop up in your podcast app, whatever one you use, and I'll talk about them on social media too when they come out so that you can know that there's a new episode to listen to. Probably the biggest thing that I'm going to be doing during this break is I'm going to be helping moms launch their podcast through a group coaching program that I'm calling the Podcast Launch Club. I'm so excited. I haven't talked about this publicly yet, and I'm so excited to finally be talking about it. So I could talk about this all day long. I'm really, really excited about it, but I'm trying to keep this episode short, or at least shorter. So here are the broad strokes of what the Podcast Launch Club is. I'll be helping you launch your podcast in the first 4 weeks of January. We will go through the entire process of creating a podcast, starting with your why and going all the way through to a launch calendar that will help you hype up your show and get people excited to listen to it before it even comes out. And oh, I'm so excited. Probably the best part, the part that I'm the most excited about, is it's a hybrid group coaching program. If that's probably the best way to describe it, because I don't know of any other program that is like this, but the first week is you will meet one-on-one with just me. It won't be with the group, because I want to make sure that your foundations of your podcast are solid. And then the next 3 weeks we'll meet as a group, and I will answer all of your questions. There will be a video of me teaching you different things for launching your show, and then a workbook that goes along with it. And then we'll meet as a group where you can ask me all of your questions and anything that's specific to your show that's coming up. And you'll have access to me via Voxer, which is like a messaging app. It's my favorite way to communicate with my clients. So that if you have a specific question that you are either nervous to share with the group, so you don't really want to ask in front of everyone else, or you just need an answer really quick, you can ask me on Voxer. And yeah, I'm so excited. It's going to be so much fun. And the last thing I'll say about it, even though I've already talked about it more than I thought I would, is there are only 8 spots available, because I want to make sure that each person that's in the Podcast Launch Club feels like they get the help that they need and they don't feel like they fall through the cracks. So that is the Podcast Launch Club. I'm so excited. I'll be talking about it a lot more on Instagram. So if you don't follow me yet, follow me over on Instagram, and I'll talk about all of the details and get so excited over there. If you're not on social media, I will be sending out some emails about it. So if you want to hear about it, but you're not on social media, then join my email list. I'll put a link in the show notes for how to do that. And you can get all of the information that way too, because I know not everyone is on social media. Okay, the last thing that I'm going to be doing in between seasons is getting ready for season 3. And I am so excited. I am so excited to have time to really figure out what you need from me for season 3 and make sure that I'm giving you all of the information and interviewing all of the cool people for season 3. And season 3 is going to start the first week of March 2025. And I'm so excited. It's going to be so much fun. And I already have so many exciting and fun ideas. But if you have something specifically that you want me to talk about, or a podcaster that you're like, oh my gosh, I really want you to interview such and such so that I can hear from them and learn from them, let me know. Social media, or leave me a comment on Spotify, or send me an email. Any of the ways that you can connect with me, let me know what you want to hear so that I can make sure that I make that happen for you. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the spring.